picking up where we were last time we were taping. To expand what I was talking about in the kind of rhetorical question about why should anyone put up with blah, blah, blah. You all remember that. Those of you who were here, those of you who weren't, hell with you. Should have been here. You need to clearly see, it's no great trick, all you got to do is go past the first story that life has already made extant in, let's speak of our time and our place. And as always, of the middle of a bell curve, sane, everyday, hoi polloi bourgeoisies and bourgeoisiettes. That people are now wired up, their chemical balances are such that they have an in common, a widely held, they might call it feelings, they might call it beliefs, as to what is absolutely required. But you have got to see, without any great mystical effort whatsoever, just going past the first story, getting into the area of thinking when you do not have to see quite clearly that that which is absolutely required generally can be individually avoidable. One of the things that you need to realize that makes this operational is that that is not simply a cute idea, or that it's not possibly true here and there. The first part to see is that there are stories such as family responsibility. I can pick some that do not sound quite as dangerous, but what the hell. Let's stick with that one. Middle of the bell curve, middle class, everyday, reasonable, sane people in our time and our place. Their chemical makeup, their wiring system is such that any statement such as we all have, let's say to our children, we all have responsibility to our children, no matter what their age, even when they get to be extremely annoying. Even should they reach the point in life on their own that they begin to live in such a way as we find to be absolutely intolerable, they're still, and some people would have adjectives come to their little wiring system here that might have to do with religious, but even were they not particularly religious, they simply feel it, and it translates into neural talk that there are certain things that are generally inescapable, even if your child grows up to be a serial killer. And I don't mean doing deathly harm to Kellogg's and Post, or that dirty little Captain Crunch, whom I personally don't like the looks of, but it is an accepted fact. You will not find sane, middle of the bell curve rejection of this. If indeed someone stood up publicly and hollered, listen, if your kids annoy you, to hell with them. I mean, once they get old enough, 16 or 17, they can get a job, they got a car. They're old enough not only to annoy you personally, they're old enough now to do things, to buy things, to engage in activities that cost money that they got somewhere, to even annoy you more. When they get that old, whatever their age, 16 or 17, let's say, it doesn't matter. But if somebody stood up and said, well, hey, if it reaches that point, and you tell them once or maybe twice, be big about it and say, hey, don't do that, and they do it again, just forget about it. Just walk away from them if it annoys you. You need to see, it has nothing to do with you personally. It has nothing to do with your religious background. It has nothing to do with the way your parents raised you, because I'll still assume that your parents, in most cases, were about as sane and middle of the bell curve as you people are. But your whole system rejects that. And forget whatever story follows, such as, well, the God said not to. You are simply wired up, your chemical makeup is such, to take this general requirement personally, that is individually, period. No commas, no consideration of, well, it is the first story again. No one questions it. If indeed someone got up and appeared to be relatively sane and said, well, there are areas here that we could seriously question, then the ordinary, the majority of people, would just immediately decide that the person who said that, rather than being as sane perhaps as they looked in the beginning, that this person is a danger. You know, we may have here an illegitimate son of Mussolini or something, or Stalin, that we don't even want to hear anymore. There's no need to go any further because there are no exceptions to say to turn your back on a child, no matter how old it is, or that there's any exceptions to family responsibility that you just... And any of you who find that too viscid, I shouldn't help you out, but how about nationalism, chauvinism? Most people are wired up, and their chemical balance is such that nationalism, love of homeland, is just about that far behind the feeling of unconditional obligation to family, even when it puts burrs under your limbic saddle. That there is still that feeling that, well, my country right or wrong, etc. I hate to die, but I'll do it for my country. And you can't spit on my flag. You can't talk that way about my country. It is not learned. It is not political. It is not either a liberal delusion or a conservative fixation. It is a part of the general chemical makeup and wiring, the electrical system of middle-class humans. It is the history of humanity. The past history, it is the present history, and it is the forward history. It is there. So there's nothing to analyze past that point. There's nowhere to look and say, well, my father was such a redneck, dyed-in-the-world conservative. He's the one that just shouted in my ear all my life, hooray for America, hooray for America, or Brazil, or Albania. And so that's why I am either now anti-Brazilian and Albanian, or that's why I'm such a dyed-in-the-wool patriot. It's none of that. You can't look to your parents. Your parents didn't cause you. Unless perhaps, of course, somebody here did have a father who was... You don't have to raise your hand, but I would like to know maybe after the meeting. His name was Jehovah, I think, or Zeus. A real big guy, I think, with a big beard. Thunderbolts for eyebrows, but... Other than that, people just don't realize your parents didn't make you like you are, not unless your parents were the deities, and I don't mean some low-level deities. They had to be the first one, the first stage. There is nowhere to look for these kind of general requirements of life, all the way from nationalism, that people, no matter who it is, and from your view, if you were just an ordinary, let us say, Syrian, there is nothing acquired in life to account for you being so vehemently anti-Israeli. Nothing. Now, the first story, of course, shows it is. I've read a little bit, and if I was Syrian, or if I was on the other side, you can immediately say, well, now wait a minute. All you got to do is look back 12 years ago, or all you got to do is look back 472 years ago when such and such happened. You think we're going to forget that, and it's still going on. Now, if you're ordinary, the general requirement is that no matter where you are, that you've got some sort of enemies, you have some already wired up electrical and chemical makeup in you to make you passionately chauvinistic, nationalistically speaking. But it did not come from anywhere that you can identify. It did not come from your parents. It did not come from your parents' experience, nor did it come from their parents' experience, although, one more time, don't ignore this obvious, although all of the stories, the history, the immediate and the not so immediate history, will give a reason as to why, if you're Syrian, you would hate the Israelis or anybody else, or why the Turks would hate the Armenians, or, of course, why the Armenians hate the Turks. There is history. You won't find any group of people anywhere that say, do you hate the people across the border? And they say, with a passion. And you say, why? And they go, well, we don't know why. There will be a why. Well, obviously you don't know your history. You do not know what happened between us and those unruly Turks. And then you fill in some blank. It was last week, 2 years ago, 2,000 years ago. But that is not it. There are general requirements that have nothing to do of any passing or any lasting interest. They have nothing to do with who you are, where you came from, who your parents were, what your religion is, what your culture is, what your political or economic history is. Although, surely, let me off the hook the last time, keep in mind, this doesn't mean that any stories that the Armenians have about slaughters inflicted on them by the Turks, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I don't care whether it happened or not, since I wasn't there, of course. When I say I don't care, I am not trying to give a history lesson. I'm not saying it did not happen. It's irrelevant. Because you will not find any requirement that life is made of man generally. That is, anytime there seems to be aggression going on, anytime there seems to be conflict, there will be a reason why, was what the little joke was of asking, why do you hate your neighbors? We don't know. Everybody knows. Everybody's got a reason. So remember that. I'm not saying that. I'm not arguing history. It's just irrelevant. That's the first story. That's the first analyzation of it. Nothing. Not if you're going to travel. Not if you're going to try and do something with your own nervous system. None of the stories are any good other than a hobby of reading history, which is as good as any other hobby. So you've got to understand that all across this planet, there are general requirements. They seem to vary a little bit because there seems to be varying moralities, varying ideas as to family responsibilities. It seems to be slightly altered one place to another as to the way in which parochial nationalism manifests itself. But it's all basically the same. It is the general requirements that you see in life and that you feel in you. And you simply accept it. You're supposed to accept it. If you're ordinary, there's nothing wrong with accepting it. All you've got to do is go past the first story. And I don't bring this out to try and convince any of you individually or in general to undertaking a particular course of action toward your parents or toward your uncle's idea of patriotism. But you have simply got to find out for yourself with no great effort. All it takes is effort. Past the point of having any question. It doesn't seem to be open to any question. The matter of family responsibility, of patriotism, of fidelity to your culture, to your religion. All of the things that are middle class. All of the things that hold civilization, this planet, at the ordinary level, that hold it together. Notwithstanding the fact I know that, again, varying from here and there, that individuals may seem to have some question that I don't agree with the degree of passion that my peers have toward, not our country, but our locality, our state. Who the hell cares if you're from New Jersey or Iowa? I don't get all excited about that. I've lived all over the country. Now I'm pretty defensive and patriotic about our country, but what difference does it make? It's just artificial lines that divide the Missourians from the Arkansasians. I don't want to be upset. It doesn't matter to me. There's still that kind of room. But the general requirement is that you be passionate, that you feel, and have a story if anyone asks you, but that you feel these general necessities of defense, love of country, that is simply love of locale, love of your past, of your family, of your heritage, and on and on and on. To simply see that it is there. Forget, I've already told you, but forget you're wasting your time about, well, exactly where did it come from. It came from being alive. It came from you having to have been born inside of this life. Now, if you want to get away from it, you're going to have to find some way out of this life. But then you find out, as real, as serious, fill in all sorts of important words here, as spiritual, as holy, as cosmic, as civil, as sophisticated, as necessary, as such things as love of family, love of country, respect for my forefathers' religion, or devotion to it, as serious, as real, as necessary as that is, I suggest, if you have any chance of becoming extraordinary, of doing something out of the ordinary with your nervous system, all you've got to do is think just a little bit more. You don't have to go off on a trip to India. You don't have to buy a book. You have to go just past the point. You're already at a point of certainty. Not that I necessarily treat my family right, but by God, I know how they should be treated. I know what I should do. I don't always measure up, but I know what I, and of course every other decent, civilized human should do. So that's not in question. See, that's first story. You go a little past that, and it's not that they're wrong. It's not that, well, now I see the light. You shouldn't love your family. You should poison them. Or you should at least make rude noises and embarrass them in public. It's none of that. But it's to find out if it be true for you, which if you need a litmus test is whether you belong in this, but to find out that things that are generally, absolutely required may quite well be individually avoidable. It's not necessarily that you would want to at all times. It's not some blanket escape hatch for me to try and offer and say, well, you can find out that you can get to a certain point or see it in a certain way and figure, to hell with all, anybody that's kin to me, fuck them. I don't care. It's not necessarily that, but it's to find out that which is generally required, and it's in the chemical makeup, it is in the wiring system of everybody. When I say it's generally required, see, the first story is, your intelligence will say, well, it's generally required by my religion. It's generally required by the society in which I grew up. It's generally required by just humane behavior, at least by Western standards. It's none of that. But it feels. Instead of think, this is one of the few times I'll go along and use it tonight at this one place. It feels to humans indisputable. Notwithstanding that they may admit that they do not absolutely live up to the letter of what they know to be correct in any of these areas of nationalism, respect for religion, obligation to family. That is the general requirements. But all you've got to do, at least a few people, I don't know whether everyone hearing this fits into this, but if you get past the first story, is to find out that which is generally required of humanity may well be, in your case, or if you're the right one, forget well be, they're individually avoidable. That the requirements in general are not the individual requirements. If we need a parenthetical tonight, which I know several of you didn't bring yours, so I thought I might add, if anybody's intelligence is telling them that, well, I don't know about this, that sounds interesting, or it sounds weird, or I don't, how do we know it's true? If any of you are dragging your heels, notice this. One of my past secret laws of physics I kindly revealed to you people, and that is that the world is big enough for everybody. Notice this. I kept talking about the middle class, the middle of the bell curve, the general requirements such as obligation and love of your family. Do note that there are enough exceptions outside, that is, of people that kill each other in the family somewhere just in our country, probably once a week in each individual state. Some family member kills another one. So I just want to point out, it is not as though this is absolutely unknown to life, because there is nothing unknown to life, in case you hadn't figured that out. So the general requirement, I'm saying, that there should be, that life requires that there be a kind of blind, unconditional feeling of obligation toward one's immediate kin. That's a fact. And if we wanted to play psychology or sociology, which I know most of you are too tired to play, but you would say, well, we've got to have that kind of feeling. Somewhere genetically, grandmother nature understood that we have got to feel that kind of closeness to one another, or humanity would not have time to evolve and to nurture their brains, and we had to be protective and decent to one another and not have the kind of attitude that perhaps alligators have toward their aunts and uncles, and they get in each other's way and they bite their leg off. Humans had to in some way become a little more civilized. You could say that. And again, the first story is just as true as rain. You can just say, oh yes, that's just obvious. But there's enough room. Life already knows. Life already knows, and the proof is there, by the exceptions, just ordinarily speaking. That is, of people who kill their family members, traitors to their country, that they're found out. And even reporters covering trials look at them and go, ugh! How could you sell for just... And plus they find out that all they got was like $42,000 over 5 years for selling out their country. And hardened court reporters, bailiffs, people that hang around courts, they go and spit on them. Life allows that to happen. That is the general requirement, that you have got to be faithful in your obligations to your family and your culture and etc. Although that's a general requirement, it's not absolute, because they're traitors, they're mother and father killers, they're kid killers, and things don't fall apart. That was the parenthetical for the night, least any of you think, well, that kind of thing is not possible. Everything's possible. And of course, if you get past 3D sight, it's not that everything's possible, everything's already been done. Your 3D sight may say, well, it shouldn't have been. I don't like it. The last time we were taping, I took enough space and time when I was suggesting that you people ask your own old revolutionary self, OLE, not your old one. It's just a phrase of familiarity. Try to use it yourself, since you don't know who it is you're talking to anyway. But go ahead and fake it like, it's old me again. When it's just sort of a blank space. It's just like you walked out and there is this cleared area around the building site. But you got to act sort of hip here and there, and you got to go, oh yeah, like I knew I had places in my brain that were there that I could get to that weren't actually working yet. Oh yeah, I knew that. How you doing? How you doing? But to ask yourself, your revolutionary self, to ask yourself, why would anybody put up with anything that they don't like, that's not absolutely, minimally required to support and sustain life? To realize on your own, just to get past the first story, the first apparently satisfying analyzation, or at least acceptance, well, that's just the way life is. You've got to put up with your kids. You've got to feel this way about your religion or your father's religion, or you've got to feel a kind of obligation to your locale. There is nothing in the ordinary balance, chemical and electrical, of an ordinary person, that is an ordinarily sane middle-class person, to tell them there's anything beyond that. It's just like, well, here you are. We're all subject to gravity. We're all subject to that. We just got to do it. And anybody that would say otherwise is as insane, is as dangerous as somebody telling you, well, you can jump off the top of a building and gravity won't affect you if you don't believe in it. Doesn't matter whether you believe in it. You jump off, you'll die. So I'm not going to sit here, I'm speaking for ordinary intelligence now, I'm not going to hear somebody say, well, look, you don't owe just absolute unconditional fidelity to your family. And just because somebody says that, I'm not going to go out and try it, because I know you do. And if I tried to do that, it'd be like jumping off a building hollering, well, I don't believe in gravity. And you can't do it. And of course, life, sure, life doesn't need me to compliment it periodically, but life has reigned so beautifully that those that would say that are those that would say that. And they're correct. But those of you, will assume, trying to do whatever the hell this is, trying to do something inside of yourself, trying to live more from the inside out based upon a new area of your own brain. There is a kind of energy conservation. There is a kind of limitation to the amount of energy, which you can read as being temporal, not just spatial, not just matter, but how long you're going to live. How much time, just every day. Ordinarily, have you got to spend, if not physically wrestling with your family, they could be dead. You may not be materially wrestling with them, but you're still wrestling here with your mother. God, if I could just bring her back, just see her one more time and apologize, for turning into a drag queen, or if I could just beg her forgiveness for becoming a Presbyterian, or something horrible like those kind of examples. Don't any Presbyterian drag queens write me. I don't. It could have been anything. There are all sorts of things that you are doing, and you don't notice it until you notice it, that continually annoy you by nobody's judgment. Just take your own. And if you really begin to have a new level, a new twist on what annoying is those things that do not feed your interest in this. It's those things that hold you where you are. It's those things that are repetitive and there's no way out. And worse than no way out, I'll give you a second parenthetical right quick. Listen, not only is there no way out, but there seems to be a first story as to why there's no way out. And everybody else just goes, well, there's no way out. And you keep running up against, well, it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And sometimes I try to think, and I think, why? And then that same old story comes back that everybody else says, well, ain't no way out. And I go, yeah. Doing that which is generally required by life, when it could be individually avoidable, is real bad for the planting season. It's horrendous for harvest time, but you don't notice it until you get down and notice how many things you do that you don't question. Now you might want to tell me or some psychologist, or you might want to say, I wish I didn't worry so much about blank, about my children since I got divorced and their mother moved them to Saskatchewan and I never see them. Oh, I could go out there, but I don't know. I guess I'm just too lazy. I hadn't gone out there. Boy, I feel terrible. I wish I could, or do something about it rather than just sit around and worry about it. That's what I should do, is do something about it instead of just sit around and worry about it. Yes, sir. That's what I should do. Rather than just worry about it now and then. No. So you know how it goes. And there seems to be no way out. Besides the fact that in a real dry moment, your brain or somebody else's brain might say, well, look, why don't you just go out and see them? Why don't you move out there? Why don't you get rich and offer to move them back here so they can live next door to you or something? Well, of course, yeah, literally you're correct, but, oh, I don't know. No, I don't, it's just not going, I don't know. I wish I could quit worrying about it. I wish things weren't like they were. I wish I could fly. I wish I would look more like Robert Redford, There is nothing native in the chemical and electrical balance of the middle class, the backbone, the heartbeat, and the blood, the main blood supply of life via humanity, that offers any sort of valid information, even a hint to say that some things you could individually avoid, even things that seem as important as da-da-da-da, obligations to one's children. There is no hint anywhere. And when it happens, when it seems to happen, the middle class rightfully, that is, the sane people, rightfully condemn it. If they found some sorry bastard and they were rounding up people who are at least 10 years behind in child support, and they round them up here in Houston, and as they're dragging them in, they got hundreds of them. And so they stop one guy, and the sheriff's deputies are standing around there waiting to drag him into the jail. They let some reporters talk, and maybe they ask a guy, is it true that you hadn't paid child support in 10 years? And the guy says, hell no. Didn't plan to, didn't want to. Well, how long has it been since you've seen your children? Since they're about 6 months old. The old lady left me. Well, don't you feel bad about it? The guy says, hell no. What the hell do I care? I didn't tell her to get pregnant. I don't care nothing about kids. Yeah, but they're your little kids. So? They got to be somebody's. I didn't want them. What the hell? You know, no offense to them, but what the hell? But you didn't feel any obligation to send them money or something? Hey man, do you know how much beer is now? Do you know the price of cigarettes? All right. Then the other part of life's body, you understand, we just roundly condemn that just to find it just to be insane. And yet it is possible. It is not a secret to life. But back to the main track. And for you people who may be getting this on tape, at some other time and some other place, none of this is encouragement to be a bad father, a uncaring mother, etc., or a traitor to your country, your tribe, your city, your cause, your religion, etc. But those who belong in this are more universal to start with. It's not a matter that your family is your only family or that your absolute physical locale is your homeland. That's back to the old building sites. If you never get past that point, you're never going to find out what this is anyway. And it doesn't mean that you in some way then suddenly develop a distinct distaste for your family or your physical place of origin. It doesn't mean that at all. But you realize that all of those words such as parochial, they got a lot more meaning than the ordinary intellect can ever comprehend. It's not just having limited interest in life and only having limited or having your interests and concerns economically and politically only limited to your locale and that which affects you, because if you've got anything resembling more universal intelligence, you understand that everything that's happening in Albania affects you. That it is strictly parochial intelligence. It is old intelligence. It is ordinary intelligence that believes that my immediate environ is it. My family, my personal family, my kin, the immediate body politic here, the immediate economic situation here. That's what I got to deal with. Now all of that sounds all right if there was an out there. But anybody with any sort of new intelligence understands not only is there no out there, but all this about political affairs, economic affairs, family affairs, all of that is nothing but the operations chemically of my own brain. And am I going to stay here forever? Am I going to swim in this same chemical genetic pool around and around and around? I'm going to do laps forever. And I guess my own brother, that is the other part of my brain, will say, you become some swimmer, neurally speaking. Yes. How far have you gone now? Over the last 20 years, I must have clocked, I'm getting close to 62,000 miles. I am impressed. Other than the fact the person's doing laps in a pool. Now, you didn't swim somewhere. You didn't get out of town. You're still there in the same locale. That is, you're still in the same area of your own brain. You're doing laps. I'm a great swimmer, making good time. Back and forth. How about a little twist of me, the beginning of tonight's, of someone attempting to do this, having to realize on their own that that which is generally required of humanity can be individually avoidable. Now, how about a little twist before we go on? For me to say that once you understood that and didn't forget it, you might then treat it in reverse. To take all those little avoidable things and treat them as though they were de rigueur. Because we've been through this before, you just didn't, I just wind the wagon trains back to take little things that are just, I mean really avoidable. Like I don't have to turn out the lights. I don't live at home anymore. If I leave the room, I'll leave the damn lights on. My daddy or mama ain't here to tell me to cut them off. Really? Well, why do you keep saying that? They're still here. Every time you walk out of the room, leave them on. Your mama and your daddy says, turn off those damn lights. Yeah, but my daddy's dead. Been dead a long time. Well, why are you telling me that you don't have to do it? You don't. Well, of course you hear what I'm saying. If ordinary intelligence could admit it, they'd realize that probably a large percentage of the time that I walk out of a room and leave the lights on, I hear my father say, cut out those lights. But I don't have to do it. Because he ain't here and I pay the bills. I'll leave them on all night. But do you understand that there is the kind of avoidable thing? It may seem like nothing, but you're doing laps in your own brain pool forever and ever when you should be or could be doing something else rather than, I don't have to turn them off. Maybe not, but you have to think about it. Every time you walk out and you leave them on, you have to think about it again. So, I was going to point out, once you have a personal understanding of this, I'm suggesting that you might put it in reverse. And you might then take those little avoidable things. Let's discount, separate right now hearing your father's voice. Let's just say that there are things that you, without hearing any voices from the past, that you have decided to do. That why should I keep paying Con Edison or Pacific Gas and Light or Georgia Power Company? Why should I pay them to leave lights on the other end of the house? I turn them on when it gets dark, and most nights I never go up there until 12:30. I'm going to bed and I'll go back in there and turn them out. Or, that sounds a little too push for you. How about all the personal habits that people say, I should vacuum at least once a week. I should quit drinking so much sugary drinks. I should quit smoking. I should wash my car at least once a week because, I don't know, it'd look better, and they say that it might be easier to keep the paint, make it look fresh, to get off some of that kind of road grime and tar. Little things that are avoidable. That is, you can live and never worry about cutting off lights in a room that you've left. You can live probably a decent age if you continue to drink real sweet drinks. All sorts of things. It is trying to, for no particular reason, that is that you understand that it is no longer individually necessary that I do this. And then to undertake certain ones, some ones, a one, several is better, of things that are actually individually avoidable. And for you to do them as though it was at least one or two commandments that you did not get from Jehoshaphat or Jehovah from a mountain, is you stamp them on your own brain that I'm going to do this. But it has to come from a new place. You just decide to do it. If at the building site there were any other voices, they might say, well, you don't have to. You'd say, shut the hell up. Or if the other voices say, well, why in the world do you want to do that? Such voice as that, a good response from once you begin to develop your intellect in a certain way, and your own voices say, well, why would you want to do that? Is you can respond, like, that's why. Because anybody that asks you why would ask an artist with a non-representative, an abstract painting, what does that mean? Of course, the ordinary level, all of you artists and those of you that can feel for artists and think about it, know that an ordinary artist then goes, where's my manager? Where's the critic? Where's the last guy that wrote up my show? To ask somebody, what does that mean when it seems to be meaningless to me? A better example is to let your old intelligence, your old electrical and chemical balance, that here it is you're doing something, that now you wash your car every day. You give it at least a sponge bath every day, even if it's raining. Well, anything this side of a flood or is lightning outside, you might get killed. If it's just raining, you'll still go out. You've decided it. You'll get up and run, and you'll do whatever, read the paper, and take a shower. But then you'll begin to leave the house 10 minutes early, which will be 8:10. And every morning, if it's safe, you're going to at least sponge down the car and wipe it off. And let's say that there is no recollection in your past, no memory of your father saying, son, it's a man's obligation to wash his car. Maybe your father didn't even drive. Maybe your father was a slob. So let's say that there is no recalled basis for this. That is, you do not have even a general feeling of the necessity of doing this. And you decide to do it. And that's when I was saying, if other voices, that is, your sane, good old rational, dumbass self says, what in the world are we doing this for? What's the meaning of this? The kind of response to that is, the real response, if you know how, is to ignore it, which is the ultimate insult. Well, one person to another, if you know how to do it, is the ultimate operational insult to yourself. Why should I do that? The question is beyond loaded. Why should I do that? Anybody's got to ask, why should I do anything, shouldn't do it. Or they should do it. What difference does it make? But they're not going to understand any reason, or they wouldn't say, well, why should I do this? If you could understand, you wouldn't ask. What's the meaning of this? If I could tell you the meaning of it, you'd already understand it. If you could hear the meaning of it, you'd understand it. Why should we get up and do this? You don't have to do this. I just thought I'd give you that twist. And I'm not just being funny or trying to be shocking by making those gestures. Doesn't that mean that your uncle's an accountant? Well, in Italy, they kept, well, was somebody fooling me? Oh, well. Let me pick up a piece of something else from the last several nights before it gets too far away. When I was mentioning that there is an aggression that seems to happen between family members, between lovers, between everybody, and it comes out, at least in a fairly non-violent way, as criticism. And I pointed out that, if you could see in a more complex way, that very kind of apparent aggression, that very kind of criticism could be seen as an unrecognized attempt to compensate, to help the person that you're being aggressive against, that you're criticizing. And let's tie that with something else you recall. I was pointing out that the human intellect, part of its job in secondary affairs, which is where the human intellect has its present street address, in case you hadn't figured that out, that part of its responsibility is to make things bigger than they are, tied to the fact that it is only in secondary affairs that life now sees fit, we can say seems able, but that's just seems fit, to make intergenerational changes, that it does not do so on primary levels. It does not cause general mutations within one person's lifetime on a primary level, that is, on a physical level. But it can on a secondary level. It can create just jolts in certain areas of the planet's history almost overnight. Certainly within a matter of a year or so, can cause tremendous alterations in one part of its body, that is, one part of a country somewhere, one part of this planet. All right, now all of that, are you with me? All those things spread out over off and on the last 4 or 5 tapings, and the example, for instance, I was using not only the beloved, but there being even between aggression and the criticism between lovers, that it could actually be seen as being an attempt to compensate for the beloved's perceived faults. Then we'll get to speed here in a second. Keep listening. Tied to the other one of the human intellect being responsible in part for making things larger than they are, and I took a hobby of the enjoyment and collection of recorded music. And then the human intellect can go beyond that, and some guys decide, let's start a magazine, so that then you can read about listening to recorded music. All right. Now, all of that, I wanted to say, are you with me? But even rhetorically, sometimes that frightens me. I don't want to think about it. So here I go. Another aspect in the cracks between all of those three general areas, and part of a cohesiveness to it all, is this. When the beloved, or when the rival, let me set up the magazine, 1 second. The magazine that is an expansion via the human intellect, that there's now a magazine that has expanded this already secondary activity of listening to recorded music. Not you playing music, not you even going out and live listening to music, but now you are sitting home and listening to recorded music. You buy records and you listen to them. Now there's a magazine. This has expanded the scope of that secondary activity. There's now a magazine that you can sit there and read a magazine, and the articles are about listening to recorded music. Let's expand that. After a reasonable length of time, and the magazine takes on a life of its own, then there will begin to be critics of the magazine. Newspapers, for instance. Somebody will take note of the magazine and begin to criticize it. After that, it won't be but about 2 short spits, and a rival magazine will come forward. All right? So now we've got, trust me a minute, you'll see. Said he, hopefully. Now, back to the main thoroughfare. In regards to a beloved criticizing the lover. In regards to now the rival magazine making comments criticizing the first record magazine. Tacit, unrecognized in both of these instances, wherein the lover criticizes directly the beloved, questioning their intelligence, their character, whatever, a personal criticism. With that, and with this new magazine, let us say that they get the mailing list and you have subscribed to the world's first magazine having to do with recorded music. So they already got your name, and now you get a solicitation. It's a nice big packet and an introductory offer for the new magazine, the brand new, the second one. Now, a large part of their sales pitch is going to be what? Criticism of the first magazine. The criticism there, and apparently the criticism between two lovers, between two humans. The criticism not only points out the flaws, like the lovers, God, are you dumb? You don't ever think before you move, before you operate. That, and the new magazine says, Magazine 1, the original recorded music magazine, may have been all right in the beginning, but they absolutely refuse to cover any new music. They just will not. It's as though the present, it's as though music stopped at the turn of the century. Tacit, but operational in the criticism of the lover for the beloved, for the rival magazine to the original magazine, is also this. And this is where the collusion, but it's not recognized. The criticism is, I, the lover, or the rival magazine, we, it, does not suffer from this shortcoming. Thus, my criticism activated, combined, me, the lover, this magazine and the other magazine, my criticism activated, executed, taken care of, would then make I, comma, us, we, completed. No one, it's not psychological, it has to do with the flows of energy, the profitable, useful flows of energy. No one criticizes another human without. And if they were asked, they wouldn't take a lot of trickery, they would admit. They might try to hedge their verbal bet a little bit, but no one criticizes another person who will admit that they suffer from that same flaw. That is not the way energy moves. And if it did happen, it would be wasted energy, and it would just come and go and nobody would notice it. No one criticizes their lover, their family member, another human, on the basis of some perceived flaw. We're not questioning, we're not taking into consideration any idea of any objectivity, whatever the hell you earthlings think that is. But it's the one person perceiving another person, God, are you dumb? Geez, are you irrational? Geez, are you too hasty and never think, never plan? Whatever it is, they are also saying, I got to repeat, this is not psychological. I know it sounds that way, but if you take that, you'd take any first story. They are saying, I do not suffer from that, because that's the way energy is. If this source of energy, in this case, let us say the lover one, accusing lover two of being dumb in a particular way. If lover one perceived, if this could happen, it would be an injustice, it would be wasted energy. If they could perceive that there is a hole in their makeup, there is a flaw in the other person, and it was the same flaw that they, if we could compare them exactly, it was the same kind of flaw that they had, the reality is the first person would never notice it. But if I'm going to play with justice, if you're following this right quick, and it's possible they could, and they said it, it'd be meaningless. Even the second person wouldn't take it seriously, even if they heard the words. It'd be like a duck having a goose come up and say, you talk funny. And what's a slain duck going to do with that? He's going to figure, well, he's going to forget it. There's no way he's going to take it personally. For a goose to come up, however a goose would talk, and say, you talk funny, quack, quack. It's meaningless. That is not what happens. If it does happen, it just passes. It was grounded out energy. It was wasted. It was an impotent transfer of energy. So you have the lover saying, without understanding it, saying to the criticized beloved, I do not suffer from that flaw. Because if it was a psychological explanation, which wouldn't amount to anything, it would be on the basis that the only reason I can see your flaw is because I don't have it. The rival publication is saying, and I bring this up, it may at first strike you as having no particular relationship, but it has every relationship in the world. The rival magazine that sends you out this print material, giving you the introductory offer and going to send you a free record album or something, but then they really push on, well, besides all the bonuses and the gifts, why should you subscribe to us? We're going to tell you. And they point out a flaw. They will not cover such and such. They do not cover enough new music. They will not cover enough choral music. They will not cover, if it was more popular music, they say they will not cover any imported albums. Any rock group now, anything going on in Europe, South America, they just refuse to cover. And I know once they even said editorially is because they only wanted to cover that which was readily available in the marketplace. Aha, it shows how behind they are because we've already done research. Anyway, they will pick out an area that absolutely they can point to and say, our rival does not do this, and of course they should be because this is a part of this secondary activity. This is a part of the full dance. They are saying, and they may put it in print, but they don't have to go any further because what they're saying is, now listen, this is the weird variation between humans doing this and then on another apparent level. They're saying, we will be, maybe their first issue hadn't even come out, which doesn't matter, remember, because this is all secondary affairs. It's right here. This is something separate from having a physical magazine. But they're saying, without even being that specific, they're saying when we start publishing, number one, we will do everything that they're already doing. Now, we'll do everything. They don't even have to say that. You just accept it. Two, we will do that which is flawed in them. We will do that which is lacking in them. To use my example, we will cover new choral music. Do you understand? They have stated then without even saying it that we will be perfection. And don't take that in a slight or even a cynical manner. We will be complete. We will be the recorded music magazine. Because we will be everything they are. You couldn't be a rival. You would have nowhere to start your basis of selling yourself. That is, that's a certain kind of energy. Unless you were everything they were already. People don't even expect that will be pointed out. They're saying, all right, as soon as our first issue comes out, we're everything they are. We will be. Everybody assumes that. Plus, the area that they are lacking, which we were so kind to point out to you, we will rectify. Humans, without understanding it, are doing the same thing. The criticism, that which seems to be critical aggression between people, what they're saying is, if you just tell somebody else from a certain kind of view, if you say, boy, you dumb. Well, what you're saying is, now I'm everything that you are. I don't mean dumb, but I'm everything that you are in general. I'm as intelligent, sophisticated, caring, blah, blah, blah. I'm everything that you are. But plus, I'm something that you're not. I'm not as dumb as you, and by me pointing it out, I'm attempting to compensate. Although the people involved, again, I'll admit to you, do not know this. Not supposed to know it. They'll never know it. It's not some kind of information that you can hand out and humans will go, oh yeah. Because at the psychological level, if we stop there, at the verbal level, it's really of no great meaning. It's of no particular interest. But for you to start looking around corners, for you to be able to get beyond the 3D level of the appearance of reality, is where you begin to see what holds things together, to begin to see what's really going on. That people are being aggressive to one another. They're not being aggressive. Not unless you believe that life is committing 1,000 little points of suicide. That is, that every time humans say a naughty word to each other, or every time one human goes, watch it, or every time one human just looks at no one and goes, God damn, then you would have to believe that life has got all these hundreds of thousands of little daggers and going, ooh, 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 ooh. Because life would be killing itself if that's what it was, which is not. It is an unrecognized collusion. It is an attempt to compensate between lovers, between enemies, between rivals, between the long and the tall, the short and the fat, the wet and the dry. If it was absolute collusion, if it was absolute aggression, if it was the kind of hatred that humans are also wired up to espouse great fears regarding, why is it that humanity, I shouldn't even have to say this anymore. If things are as bad as the Greeks thought, if things were as bad as the Chinese writers were thinking 1,000 years before the Greeks, we sure have been lucky, right? Or if things were as bad as people thought it was in the big war. Number one. Number two, if things were that bad, boy, we've been lucky, right? Just got by the skin of our little teeth. That is, that humans are so insane, some of them, are so hostile, so aggressive, so inhumane, that it's just a miracle we're getting by. And of course, if you can take just a little look that I've tried to get some of you in the beginning to realize that, hey, no matter how you cut it, if you've got one area of your brain that can sort of get some air conditioning, open a window, you got to admit, wait a minute, there is nothing, absolutely nothing of any lasting consequence, of any evidence that seems longer than just a fleeting moment that tells me life is going downhill. And yet the general feeling of everybody, the general necessity of humans is, yeah, whew, terrible shape, it's a miracle we lasted this long. And all you got to do is be able to get past that just a little bit, and you realize there is nothing that leads me individually to believe that. It's just not a fact. It's just not true. The answer is unrecognized collusion. All humans are working for the same employer. And there is a collusion, there is a positive conspiracy Everyone is dancing, and no one is attempting to step on anybody else. Since we ran out of tape, I guess you can, if you're hearing this, you can think about it until next time.